Welcome to the Crimson Engine. My name's Rubidium. This is the first episode of a new, longer form, almost podcast format for the Crimson Engine YouTube channel and maybe even podcast platforms all over the world. I am experimenting with different things. I've been doing the Crimson Engine YouTube videos for about a decade now, believe it or not. And I thought it might be time to try a new format, try new things. If not for the people who are watching these things, for me who is making them, I kind of want to do a bit more of a deep dive into, how I make movies, how I see the film industry changing, how I view storytelling and creativity, how I live a creative life, and the things that I've been able to do over the last, 27, 28 years in film, and, how I think that can help other people. So for what it's worth, this is going to be a much longer episode, maybe one you want to listen to rather than watch, if not both, maybe one you want going on in the background. It is going to be a lot less edited. Just as I said that, I had a huge coughing fit. So yeah, there will be edits, but I'm going to try and do something different than the YouTube channel. With the YouTube channel, I've always tried to make it very direct, very to the point. I cut out everything, my ums, my ahs, my pauses, because I have the opinion that my time is worth something, and therefore your time is worth something. I try and get to the point and get the information across about what I'm talking about as quickly as possible. That means, though, that everything sort of stays on the surface. I just give you the facts and just the facts. I don't really dwell on and, dive deeper into what it is I do, how I do it, and how I've been able to do it for as long as I have. So if you're looking for something to listen to while you're driving, while you're going places, or while you're doing whatever you're doing, this could be a new way for me to share some of the things that I've learned. And I also love to hear people's questions. I've never really opened up that before in the decade I've been doing this. So I'm really curious. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of the film industry, sort of where we are heading as filmmakers, content creators, social media influencers, and also not just makers, but consumers of media, how that is changing radically from a top-down approach to a peer-to-peer approach and a sort of super niche way of making things happen. I'm going to set a little timer here so I know how long I'm talking for. Maybe you could have guessed it by someone who's made over 700 YouTube videos, but I have no issue talking forever about anything. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I know that I have that tendency, and so I try and keep things to the point. But today, we're going to do, like I said, more of a deep dive, and we're going to start on cameras, but don't worry, I'm going to talk a little bit afterwards about why cameras don't make that much of a difference. They are a tool like a light, like your production van, like the lunch you order to keep everyone working and motivated. Too many people think that cameras are the be-all, the end-all. We'll talk about that later, but the big tendency and the new thing that's happening in the world of cinema cameras is 65 millimeter, medium format almost, you could call it for cinema cameras. For a long time, we had the Alexa 65. That's what Joker was shot on. That was what a big marquee. Ghost in the Shell was shot on that. It was rental only, so you couldn't buy it. And if you're not aware, the original Academy Emmy Award-winning Alexa sensor, the Arri Alexa Classic sensor, was Super 35 sized, so not full frame. They put two of them next to each other in the Alexa full frame, and that's how you got the full frame. They then put three of them next to each other to get the Alexa 65, but this was rental only. And the reason was It was sort of a niche product. They wanted to keep it very expensive. I don't know what the holdup is. I guess it needs higher voltage to function. It's a lot bigger of a camera. It needs to be maintained more. So Ari wanted to keep it kind of close to their cards close to the chest. For a long time, that was all you could use. The downside of the 65 is that you needed all new lenses for it. Yeah, Ari had a set. They were rental only. So it's a much larger. It meant that you could get a non-distorted picture of a shot of a small room on a not as long lens. So you had essentially, if you were shooting like that famous scene in The Joker where he's in the bathroom and he's kind of like dancing slowly under the lights, there's a really small set. They could have, in the old days, you would have had wild walls, meaning you would have been able to take the walls away to get the camera further back to get a full frame shot of the Joker dancing. But with a 65mm camera, like a sensor, you're able to be on a like 25mm lens and basically be 5 feet from the guy and get a head to toe full frame shot. It meant that you don't have to get as far back. It also meant that you could get these amazing vistas that sort of, it's hard to describe. I know the best way to describe it is if you remember the start of The Dark Knight, that shot of the window blowing out when the Joker gang start their heist. When I first saw that in the movies, it's basically IMAX, I was like, whoa, how are they shooting this? Why does it feel so epic? And it was because it was on an IMAX camera. So the Alexa 65 is essentially an IMAX camera, a digital IMAX camera, as compared to the gigantic, noisy IMAX cellular cameras. And so for a long time, that was the only option. Alexa 65, probably 10, I'm going to guess. I don't even know what the rental cost is. I would guess between 7 and 10 grand a day just for the camera body. Probably that again for the lenses. So 25,000 a day. If you're shooting $100 and $200 million movie, not a problem, but for the rest of us, pretty tough. Now, Blackmagic is coming out with the Ursa Cine 17K 65. It's going to be $31,000, which I'm sure is the most expensive Blackmagic camera ever. But man, it's going to be quite a chunky unit. But Blackmagic have come a long way in cameras in the last 2 or 3 years. They've really, really improved their sensors, improved a lot of things. I haven't shot with them. I've just heard this on the internet. I remember shooting someone shot BTS for me on the Blackmagic Pocket Pro, 6K Pro, and I just found the dynamic range terrible, very, very limited. And when I cut between my Canon C500 Mark II and the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, it was night and day. There was just no comparison. It was just it was even raw, and it was just such a flat, low quality image. So, but the Pixis that they released, full frame cinema, like box body for 5K is up there. Looks like it's doing better and better things. So the Ursa 65 is going to be 65 millimeter camera for 30K. So if you look at the rental rates for that, it's going to be around the same price as the Alexa Mini when it first came out. So $400-500 a day, probably. Not cheap, but different than 10K a day. So and then Fujifilm that have I think it's like a $7,000 or $8,000 stills camera that's medium format, and they make lenses for it. They're doing a Fujifilm GFX Eterna, which is going to be a cinema version of that sensor. I think they're going to do some other things with it, have new processing in it, but it's going to be, by all intents and purposes, pretty awesome. I could only guess the price of this. I would say 40 or 50, and won't be something owner operators buy. It'll be something that camera houses buy and rent out to the indie productions that can't afford the Alexa 65 but still want to shoot on 65 mil. It'll be pretty epic for, nature photography or whatever it is, when you want those wide, expansive vistas. So that is how cameras are evolving. That is how the production, the capture of the movies is changing. I want to talk a little bit about how, kind of Hollywood is in crisis and isn't making as many movies. The movies they're making, people aren't going to watch. This is going to be the worst year ever for the box office, which is crazy because, they're building new cinemas all the time. They're not really demolishing the old ones. The world population is still growing. So how are people watching less and less movies? There is a little bit of competition with streaming. People feel like rather than going to the movies, they would stay home and watch it. When you can get a 85-inch television for, a couple $1,000s, then there's less impetus to go and see things on the big screen when you have the big screen at home. I think that's less and less. I think the real challenge to movies is social media. It is TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, because someone told me the average American spending like 4 or 5 hours on social media every single day. It is, you're unlikely to do that and then go home and want to go to the movies. You'd probably just sit on your couch. It's so easy to sit on your couch scrolling. So that is where attention is moving. That is where the money and the advertising dollars are moving. That is where the production budgets will move. And I don't mean people are going to make $100 million TikToks. I mean that, if attention is the new currency, that is where people are putting their attention. And Hollywood is having a really difficult time convincing people to get out of their houses, get into traffic, pay $20 for parking, pay $50 for snacks, and $25, $100 if you've got a family to go and see a movie, and then fight your way through traffic home. It is a increasingly losing proposition for the viewing public, and so streamers are, I wouldn't say growing. I think Netflix is still growing. We saw that they have 240 million subscribers worldwide. Someone told me I read somewhere it's $130 million a day they make every day of the year in subscription revenue. So they can afford to make a big budget flop every single day of the year and still break even. But their library is growing. They've been through some tough periods with, password sharing, cracking down on. Disney Plus and Hulu and Amazon have all pushed into ads now. I'm really shocked that, if you pay for Disney Plus, you still have to watch ads. And, I watched them with my kids and, they didn't know what a toy ad was. Because they've grown up on streaming. We don't have, free-to-air television. And the first time they saw one, they went crazy for this. They demanded to have this toy that they've just seen because it looked so much fun. And I was like, oh God, they're not immune to the terrors of advertising. So, Disney and Amazon, for whatever reason, I think it's really going to hurt them, are pushing ads. Netflix has held the line and seems to be continuing to grow. Though, I go check in with Netflix maybe once a week, and there's very rarely new things to watch. It's like only every couple months there's a new comedy thing or a new interesting documentary or a new movie. I don't know what they're spending their money on. It's clearly not things that appeal to me. But so, films in the big Hollywood blockbuster is it's waning because people aren't going to see them. People are on their phones, not on their laptops and they're certainly not in the movie theaters. So it seems as though that is where the attention's gone, and that's where people are going to produce content, which is, good news for independent filmmakers, storytellers, content creators, influencers, because the algorithm is the best gatekeeper in history, right? Like when I moved to Hollywood in 2009, you had to, cold email people, you had to call secretaries, you had to it was almost impossible to get your script in front of someone who could make it. Whereas now, if you make a podcast or a YouTube video or a TikTok or whatever it is, you make your content about you, however it is, you upload it, the algorithms of the different platforms they're totally impartial. They don't know anything about you. They will share it to 100 people. If those 100 people watch, they'll share it to 1,000 people. If those 1,000 people watch, they'll share it to 10,000 people, and so on and so on. We're in the early days now where it's like girls dancing in their bikinis and kids hurting themselves and weird hacks in the kitchen, whatever reason. But I think that as time goes on, as people create more interesting content, and get people will find it and watch it, and it will be, if you can get enough attention, you'll always be able to monetize that attention. You'll always be able to make more. If people watch your content, then you'll be able to somehow make a living off it. Also want to talk about, should old guys be making movies? I'm 46. I'm not that old, but there are a lot of directors in their 80s still working and not working well. Ridley Scott just did a Gladiator sequel. He has been on absolute tear. He's 82. He's 86. And Francis Ford Coppola is 82. Steven Spielberg is 77. George Lucas is about the same age. They're all still making movies, and not good ones. Ridley Scott, for instance, did the Last Duel, which flopped, the House of Gucci, which flopped, Joaquin Phoenix's Napoleon, which flopped, and now Gladiator 2, which did okay. And people are like, what a success. It's a lot. It's very much the same as politics. It's not the people who should get the job that get it. It's the ones that have a lifetime of influence and connections and favors that end up getting the jobs, even though as time goes on, inevitably they're going to decline at doing what they do. They're not going to be able to connect with people now. Like Clint Eastwood is an even better example. How old's he? 94. The man is still making movies. He's still directing. It is interesting that, people who are going to put $100 million down to get the opinion of someone who was born in the 30s. Yeah, born 1930. Right? Pre-World War II. A lot pre-World War II. Yes, he has some lessons about life. Yes, I'm sure he has a style, but if you've ever directed a film, you know that it is incredibly intense and you're making decisions about everything all of the time to create this world and to, give the viewer this incredible experience of seeing of someone else's experience, someone else's perspective. I just don't see how you can do that at the level it needs to be done when you're in your 80s and 90s. Maybe I'll feel different when I'm 80 and 90. I will still want to make movies. Should I still make movies is the question, especially when so many of them do so poorly. Like the audience, I don't know if there is enough 80s and 90s people in the 80s and 90s that are going to want to see these things. It is a weird, it is inevitable, right? Like if you are revered, if you're rich, if you have so many connections and such a huge, decades-long track record of success, you are going to be able to get those opportunities. But should you? It's much like politics. I'm not going to talk about politics on this podcast because everyone else talks about it all of the time. But the leadership positions in major political parties all over the world often go to people who have the most connections, the most favors, not the people that are the most able to lead either the party or the country. And that results in bad policies. It results in bad governance. It results in poor outcomes for everyone. You know, it's a free country. The US is. You can't say, oh, I'm only going to let people who are 79 and younger run for office or direct films. It also goes to show, though, how whoever picks the people who have the power to greenlight a project are themselves probably too old. They are giving this money to their heroes and their friends rather than the people that should be getting or could make a better film and make more money for the studio. But instead, you know, it's the usual suspects. Scorsese, I watched The Irishman on Netflix. Everyone in that movie was way too old. Robert De Niro in his 70s playing a 30-something with bad CGI makeup. Joe Pesci playing, and, you know, it was like a sad echo of an old character. Scorsese, you know, not able to really keep his characters and his facts straight. Going over something he's gone over so many times. I mean, and that's before we even get to Megalopolis, where the studios wouldn't let Francis Ford Coppola make that film. They thought he was too old. They thought he had lost it. They thought he was out of touch. They thought the script that he wrote was terrible. They thought his directing was nonsensical. They were right. He made it with his own money anyway and proved them right. But, you know, it's a free country. If he wants to spend his legacy on one final disastrous film, I think that's very much in line with his philosophy of leave it all in the ring, go for broke. His career was built by movies and it was ended by movies. So I'm actually kind of proud of him. I mean, what was that $150 million going to do from his winery company anyway? It was going to go to his kids, which don't need it, who don't need it. Sofia Coppola, I'm sure, is more than comfortable. They have enough money. I'm sure Francis Ford Coppola has enough money for wine and spaghetti for the rest of his life. And yeah, why not blow it all on one last big white whale that he always wanted to make? Maybe I'll do the same when I'm old and infirm and have lost touch, if I ever had touch. So the counterpoint to should old directors be making movies, I think they should. I just don't think that the studios should be betting their stockholders money on it because it's not going to be successful. I think everyone has a voice. I think everyone has something to say and something to contribute and something to a story to tell, basically. And if you're 90-something Clint Eastwood, or if you're, a 7-year-old, what is great about the egalitarianism of making films on the internet is that no one needs to see them. That you make them and put them up. If they're not good, the algorithm won't show them to anyone anyway. If they're not, what the algorithm wants or whatever it is, you still get to have them up there. And I love going back 25 years ago and watching some of my first films I ever made. They're terrible in one sense, but there's also the seed of something magical in them. And I honestly think, look, in 1,000 years, this will all be dust anyway. We don't get to, take anything with us except the experience. We get to live the experiences that we have. And one of the greatest experiences, one of the purely human things to do is to create. It is to have an idea, to experience an idea wherever they come from. That's sort of prompted by the life that you're living, make a new connection, and then build a story from that connection that you find captivating, and then take that story and bring it to life, with actors or with animation or with AI, whatever it is, and then share that story out in the world and see how it affects others. That is one of the purest, most incredible, most satisfying, most humanizing things that we as people can do. And it used to be only for the elites. It used to only be for the rich people with Hollywood connections, or parents in the industry, or people that could afford the cameras and the lights, people that could, had $100,000 just lying around to blow on something dumb. When I started this, an Avid, which was, probably less capable than iMovie, cost as much as a down payment on a house. People got mortgages to pay for the early Avids. Now you can do that on your phone. Everyone can do it. There's no barrier for entry, and has resulted in this massive proliferation of content. Yes, but it's also resulted in the possibility that you can, not only can you do this, but you can do this as a living, and you can refine, create a community around the stories that you tell and the worlds that you build. I mean, there's never been a better time to be alive if you're a storyteller and a filmmaker, and I think we all are. So, I'm not going to shed a tear for Hollywood burning down. It's certainly, they certainly have had it coming for a very long time. I think that I'm excited to create more, not less, even if no one's seeing it, because I don't need to go and get someone else to, shoot my films for me. I can do that myself. Cameras have got so much cheaper, so much more powerful, so much more accessible, so much more controllable, and the information on how to make films, how to light, how to do sound, has all become so much more free and accessible. It's all on YouTube. I have courses on Canon Masterclass. There's a ton of stuff out there that you will find someone that you enjoy listening to, that you enjoy learning from, whose taste you respect, whose career you admire, who you want to learn from. There are plenty of people out there teaching in a way that I find really hard to learn from, because, I don't like their energy, or I don't like their take on things, or I find them kind of grating. There are other people out there that I find far too slow and boring to listen to. And there are people that are the perfect medium. And I think there's so many wonderful voices out there helping each other, telling people how they do what they do. And so I guess this podcast is just one more contribution. It's my way of putting my own voice out there, helping with not just the technical things, which I've done now for 10 years, but the philosophy behind it, the way of living a creative life, the way of coming up with ideas. And so in these future episodes, I'm going to share more and more of that. And I hope that people out there find it interesting, find it educational, find it engaging. And if you don't, that's totally fine too, as I've spoken about. But thanks for sharing this very first podcast with me. Hope to do more of these episodes, and I will see you next time.